What if you could take that risk, make that change, reach that goal, live your best life? Welcome to another episode of the What If You Could podcast, where we get together with amazing experts and everyday people who share challenges, encourage healing, and explore the possibilities that life has to offer. I'm your host, Gary Scott, and I'm excited that you're along for the ride. Go have some fun. Hey, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the What If You Could podcast. And today, my wonderful guest is Melissa Reiner. Hello, Melissa.
Hello.
Welcome, 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 welcome. If
Thank
it's okay with you, I'm just going to read your bio real quick and
Yeah.
then we'll get cooking. Does that work?
Yeah, let's get cooking.
Good biz, good biz. Okay, everybody, we have Melissa Reiner. Melissa Reiner speaks. She worked at ABC's The Good Doctor as her autism consultant for the entire 8-year run of the show. She also consulted directly with Jason Rittman on Ghostbusters Afterlife, as well as on Fox's Alert. With over 20 years of experience, Melissa has changed thousands of people's lives. Melissa developed a revolutionary 4-step technique that is incredibly powerful and effective in giving insight and agency to young people, educators, parents, and caregivers the world over. Melissa Reiner speaks, encourages people to develop the ability to have a conversation instead of a confrontation. She is acclaimed author and frequently speaks at public and private schools, corporations, and institutes to deliver tools, techniques, and resources that they need to improve communication and to grow exponentially in a more productive and authentic ways. Melissa Reiner's work is changing the world one conversation at a time.
Correct.
Love that. Holy cow. Good. I'm excited about this and I'm looking forward to this. So, but before we go down all these rabbit holes and dig deep into Melissa Reiner Speaks, with What If You Could podcast. So I always ask my guests, Melissa, have you ever had a what if you could moment? Is there a what if you could thought that you'd love to share with everybody before we hit the road?
Yeah, it's a little bit somber, but my what if I could. I lost my mom about 6 years ago to ovarian cancer, and hindsight being 2020. I think if I could uh, do that over again, obviously the obvious things I'd like her to live, but the reality is, it happens. We all die. Cancer is the worst, but I think what I would do is stay with her more. She was in Chicago, I'm in LA, and I had three little kids at the time. I still have three kids, but they're not so little. And I just felt like I couldn't stay with her as long as I wished I had been able to stay with her. And I probably could have made that happen, but I think we thought we had more time. And I just think my hope for people is it's not a pessimistic hope, but it's just that I'd rather be I'd rather be, wrong about it and go just spend as much time with your loved one, especially with a diagnosis of cancer or any illness, as much time with them as you can, and then have them live another 10 years or 50 years or whatever and be wrong about that. Because I think we all thought we had like a lot more time, and we didn't. So I regret, and I don't have many regrets in life, but I regret and I feel like I can learn from it. But I missed out on special time with my mom because I just felt like I was struggling to manage, straddling two worlds, but I wished I had. So that's my what if moment. Yeah.
Yeah. I lost my first wife to cancer.
Sorry.
And she went pretty quick. She 2 years, which seemed pretty quick, but yeah, it's never enough time. Even if you think you're there for every appointment and every this and every that, there's never enough time. And I don't remember who the philosopher was. It could have been Gandhi or Buddha or Socrates. I don't know, but I've reposted it many times on social media. I should remember who said it, but they said, the mistake we make is we think we have time.
Yeah.
And it's such a true thought, isn't it? I mean, we think we have time for everything. And
Yeah.
we really don't, do we?
Don't. And like I said, if we do, if we find out we have, just a, a huge amount, more time than we thought we would, then great. Then that's the icing on the cake. My mom, it was only 9 months from diagnosis to her passing, so it's very quick. Yeah, so I just wish I had, you know, known better and wished I had been there more.
Yeah.
Yeah,
You probably would have had a lot of conversations, and there's something about deep conversations. I remember back in the day, I had some very good friends, and one of the things we loved the most, even though some of us were as far apart on things as you could get,
right.
and some of us were very close on things, one thing we could do was battle it out for hours over a bottle of wine or on the golf course or whatever, and have the best time going at it, and then hug each other and leave
Yeah.
and say, yeah, let's do it again tomorrow. That was great, right? But
Yeah.
we can't do that much anymore, can we?
I feel like those days, what you're describing is this enriching experience. It was invigorating. Even like you said, if you're at odds with somebody and you have two different perspectives, even if it gets heated, there wasn't, it wasn't being fueled by hate. And it wasn't designed to decimate the other person and destroy the other person and eliminate the other person. And I think that's the difference because while my focus is, with kids and adults and individuals who have a diagnosis of autism or ADHD or anxiety or depression, which I feel like everyone has anxiety or depression, like welcome to the world. But but I think that this is the microcosm, being able to just speak to another person in an effective way to the macro experience that we're seeing unfold in the world and politics in the news. It's this desire to it's that cancel culture. It's the desire to obliterate another opinion, right? To blot out someone else's perspective because it doesn't align with yours instead of, gosh, I mean, God forbid, what if we actually learned from someone else or had an insight that you hadn't grasped before? What would that do to your whole, because if you're on such unsure footing that you need to try to bash your way through anyone else's thoughts or ideas, it's because you don't have much of a leg to stand on, you know?
I like the word obliterate
Yeah.
because it's not enough to state your case and
Right.
say, this is why I believe what I believe,
Yeah.
right? It's like, I need to silence you because I really don't care what your thought is because it's not my thought. And I want to erase your thought from the
Yeah.
whole universe. It's
Yeah.
bizarre, isn't it?
It's very bizarre. It's a scary time because it feels like there's this not just an inability and an unwillingness, but there's just like almost a fervent this deep desire to blot out someone else for being different or thinking differently. And like I said, if you don't feel competent or confident in your stance, then someone else, you don't want to hear someone else's opinion because it could knock all your pins down on that, on that round, right? And then you're left with what? Floundering. You don't have a leg to stand on. You know what I mean?
And it almost seems that, regardless of the side, neither one of us are picking on either side, but it just seems, regardless of what your stance is, like you said, there's this fear that if I even let the slightest bit in, like if I go, well, that wasn't that bad,
Yeah.
it's like not only are you attacked for it, right? But your tribe is going to kick you out of the tribe because heaven forbid you said, well, that one thing wasn't that bad. No, 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 no. Everything has to be bad or everything has to be good, right?
It's all gray. There is no bad or good. It's such a strange desire to seek out, everyone talks about the echo chamber and, you know, f- gosh, if we only listened to the mirror, it would be this vapid excuse for a world that we're living in, I think.
Yeah, you use the word hate. and I like to tell my friends, the ones that still talk to me, is that, you know, we on both sides go, we don't look for information anymore. We go to the side that feeds our hate. Like, I'm going to listen to that because I know that that is going to tell me what I want to hear, and it's going to keep fueling my hate and my anger.
Mhm.
Heaven forbid I listen to something over there because it might sink in, right? I might actually go, well, that kind of makes sense. And that will negate everything, right? And so we need to keep going to the source that feeds our hate instead of actually trying some other thought.
It's like back in the day when we used to hear, it sounds so tepid now, but we used to hear, like if you cook with this oil, it'll be a carcinogenic, or if you don't use this oil, it won't help you fight cancer causing. It like you would hear like these battle sort of, this embroiled in confusing sort of input scientific data, and then you'd have to say, well, who's funding that research, right? Who's giving you that evidence? And just paying attention to that, like, oh, well, the nothing against the, milk, dairy industry or whatever, but like, I happen to believe that you don't really get calcium from milk because there's such a high level of protein. So, but when the dairy industry tells you that's the best way to get your calcium, and as we get older, I'm like, I just found out I had like mild osteoporosis in one of my hips. I was like, what? So I'm like, and it's, I don't drink milk, but that's not why I don't. But so I think that there's this
Go have some broccoli.
a part of, yeah, that's right. I do eat a ton of broccoli, but there's this process of, the smartphones, with the advent of the smartphones where everything's at our fingertips. There is no real drive in the younger generation to seek out an answer. Back in the day, and I don't mean to sound like I'm an octogenarian because I'm not, but I feel like when, not that there's anything wrong with an octogenarian, but
Isn't it crazy we have to keep disclosing, hey, nothing against dairy industry, nothing
right.
against old people,
Some of
because
my
we don't
best
want to
friends
get
are old.
canceled, right?
I myself might be old. So the bottom line is we used to have to find someone who knew about that band because you can't remember the lead singer's name, or you had to remember what city had the best, Knish or something. I don't know. And so you had to like seek out, hey, are you from Chicago? Do you know where and you had to find out. We were driven and inspired to seek out answers, and there's no desire anymore because it's all here in your phone. So I just have to press a button and I can find whatever answer I want or need. And I don't have to fact check and I don't have to research any more than what has come up. Right.
Yeah.
And I think that that's just so problematic for the world today because nobody's really interested in nobody's driven. Nobody feels compelled to seek out a truthful answer and get actual information. So,
We're the most informed generation in the history of the world, yet we're the most clueless generation and uninformed in the history of the world. And I was that geek that actually couldn't wait till uh that encyclopedia salesman showed up at my door so I could finally buy it. And I remember having to pay every 2 weeks
yeah,
to get like for $12 the next volume, right? And I would
did.
I would geek out on the encyclopedia, and then
it.
then they had the annual one for the year, like 1963, 1964. And I was so excited to go get 1963, right? Because that's the year I was born. And I'm like, oh, look all the stuff that happened the year I was
Yeah.
born, right? But now, like my son lives on Chat GTP. It's
Yeah.
like, hey, Chat GTP, what should I have for lunch today? I'm like, dude, seriously?
It's like we're taking pictures of the food we eat and I was just thinking, I'm not great with like scrapbooking or making albums and stuff like that, but I have thousands and thousands of photos and videos that I never look at and I never see because it's all here. And when we used to like have photo albums, I mean, you can still print out stuff and everything, but it's just a different, I'm not like lamenting whatever, but I just feel like I do wish that there was more gratitude for the simpler things, for less tech.
What one of the simplest things is conversation. Why do you think that we've just stopped, besides the obvious of politics, but I mean, there's got to be something deeper why we've completely stopped being able to communicate.
I mean, I do think that when you look around a restaurant and you see most people at the table are on their phone. So again, I don't, I mean, I just saw something on LinkedIn or something that said like, one day we're going to look at, I think I'm paraphrasing, but one day we're going to look at doom scrolling in the same way we looked at like smoking cigarettes. Like, how could we ever have done that? It's so bad for you. It's so unhealthy. And but that's where we are, at least that's where the pendulum is right now, where we're all engrossed and enthralled by our phones. And I'm grateful with my family at dinner, I have three sons, and we have dinner together, and there are no phones at the table. We just, even if it's 10-15 minutes that we have dinner, it doesn't have to be an hour. It's not an event. But when we're eating together, we're finally just being together. And it's something I think we all really respect in our home, and we cherish it. And sometimes they can't wait.
You're so right about that. We'll go into a restaurant, my wife and I will look
Yeah.
around and literally a family of four, all four of them are on their phone, not just the kids, all four of them are staring
Yeah.
at their phones, or a couple on a date are on their phones. And I'm thinking that's not going to be a very successful date,
And
you
it's
know.
people don't want to do it.
Again, you talk about conversation instead of confrontation. And I love to talk to people. People make fun of me all the time. I literally will walk up to everyone, anyone, from the janitor to the guy parking the car to, I don't care who you are. I just got to hear your story, right? That's why I love doing this. And 99% of the time, people will be grateful when
Mhm.
someone actually asks them what they're doing.
So,
What's your story? Because we
yeah.
just don't talk to each other anymore.
You just said like I met my friend for her birthday at a restaurant, and the valet picked up my car, and I was listening to like a comedy station, like on Sirius X or whatever. And he was like, "Oh, which comedians do you like?" I said, "I love comedians. How did you know?" He said, "I see you're listening to the comedy channel or whatever, like the comedians, whatever."
Yeah.
And he said, "We just saw Pete Holmes." I said, "I had tickets to see Pete Holmes, but he goes, "Me and my wife saw, we were crying, laughing. He was so funny." And I was like, "I love him. He's like the best. Nobody knows about." And we just had this moment. It was, I don't know, a minute and a half in
Mhm.
duration, and it was a connection. So part of the issue with technology being as wonderful and as amazing as it is that it does, in an attempt to connect, like Facebook and Instagram, and it's a way for us to connect ostensibly, but it pulls us farther and farther away from an actual connection, and I know we are on technology right now, you and I, but right, but I would say you can have one thing in one hand and one thing in the other, right? You can like something about technology and dislike something, appreciate and not appreciate, right? And I think that that's fair, and I think that when we are viewing connections through followers, you know, exclusively, you're missing, and it's not, I always say it's not a connection through pixels, it's a connection because you're seeing another human and connecting in with that human. And I think it is a bit of a lost art. Um, I was grateful because he's a little bit sometimes of a moody teenager, but one of my kids, we were at someone's house for dinner, and and this and this woman said, I just met one of your sons, and he was so personable, and he was so gracious, and
Mm.
I was just I'm it's rare to see a teenager. And I said, "Mine? Him? He's never like that with me." So thank you for saying it. But who are you talking about? But it was good to know that as sort of in a room full of other adults, he was gracious, he was personable, and he was communicative because he's not always at home. And I hope that my work and who I am helps support that in my own children. And if they can go out in the world and, like even I feel like it's a lie, but the lie that I think a lot of parents hear is my kids have to play video games because that's how they connect socially. And I'm thinking, do you hear that sentence? Because while it's nice and fine for some people and it's a great way to play, you're still not playing. You're still not at the park together, shooting hoops together, going for a walk together, getting ice cream together, going to the bowling alley together. There's there's this void now of genuine interpersonal relationships based on human interaction. There's just a void now, and
Yeah.
it's upsetting and
It's
disheartening.
it's not getting better, and it seems to be getting a little bit deeper. And I used to tell my boys, ask people questions. Don't be shy. People think, "Oh, I don't want to be bothered." I go, "No, no, just ask them questions." And like what I'm going to say, but when you sit down with someone and you spend 10 minutes asking them about themselves, and when you walk away, they will say, "That was the most interesting, nicest person in the world." And then you think to yourself, they don't know my name. They never asked me anything. They don't know anything about me, whether I'm nice or not. But what I did by engaging with them made them feel better. So they thought I was a good person, right? Whether I am or not, I could be a psycho killer. But we've lost that art of sitting down and just asking people genuinely about themselves and how they feel and what they're going through. And we're also protective of our filters and our social media stuff that we've lost the deeper connection. You know what
Well,
I mean? We've
yeah, and
lost
I
that deeper sort of.
genuine. And the other thing is, I think there's, I always say I'm not an Instagram mom, even though I am a mom and I do post things on Instagram, but I'm not the person going. A friend of mine said, well, he is a high-powered lawyer. His wife just survived cancer. They have four children, two of whom, the youngest two are twins, and he helps out in the community, and he's like this amazing human. And I ran into him the other day and I said, "You're just such a wonderful dad. I love watching you with your kids." And he said, I said, "You're really great." He goes, "Yeah, but look at you. I mean, you've got it all figured out." I said, "Me? I lose my marbles every day. I get it wrong every day. And I want everyone to know that there's this Instagram kind of whatever, this facade of or veneer of perfection or what it's supposed to look like, or like, the thing you take 800 photos and you get to pick the one that is the best. And when in real life, we still, I think, are attempting often to maintain that veneer of I'm fine, I'm perfect, I'm good. My girlfriend was just going through something rough, and this is sort of what this is the way she talks a lot, but she'll say, "I'm fine, I'm fine. I mean, it's fine, it'll be fine." And I said, "It's okay if it's not, right? It's okay if it's not fine, you know?" And we're so busy trying to appear a certain way when that makes it really hard for everyone to be human, to have a bad day, to feel like I'm in a bad mood, to feel like I'm exhausted, to feel like I'm hungry, to feel like I'm fed up or thrilled or whatever it is. We're missing the real stuff, like the reality of the day to day, which is, sometimes magnificent and sometimes very upsetting. So if we're trying to maintain the appearance, we're not going to get real or deeper
Yeah.
into
You use the word
it.
exhausted,
Yeah.
exhausting. And honestly, it can be very exhausting to try to keep up that persona, that veneer, that everything's fine. I'm fine. Don't worry about it. It's fine. Everything's fine. I mean, it could be exhausting to the point of, you gotta let that go. Everybody has stuff.
Yeah.
Trust me, you're not alone, and it doesn't make you less of anything. We all have stuff, and it's okay to
Totally.
have stuff. That's just life, right?
Also, I'm not as interested in someone who at least appears to not have stuff. I'm like, we'll have nothing to talk about. If you're just smooth sailing and right as rain all the time, if everything's hunky dory, we probably won't have a lot in common, you know? And I'm a pretty positive person, but I'm also it's not interesting to me if everything's perfect and great. I'm like, well, you do you, but I'm gonna be over here with my friends who are trying to work it out, you know?
Kind of the real guys, all right? We all got stuff. So tell me about Melissa Reiner Speaks. What is Melissa Reiner Speaks?
Yeah. So I speak at schools. I do parent education. I do, professional development at schools, but also my work that I do with families in home or in their academic environment is centered around a shift in communication style. So one thing we discovered, which is very interesting, before I was saying like anxiety is just everyone has it, right? To some degree or other. I've been doing this for over 20 years. I have never met a child who doesn't have doesn't mean they have a diagnosis of an anxiety disorder necessarily, but every kid I meet is dealing with anxiety on some level, right? It may be profound and very impacting, or it may be minor, right? And sort of barely noticeable, but it's there. And what we discovered is that as an adult, as a parent, most caregiver, teacher, most adults talk to kids almost exclusively by asking questions and giving commands. So it's come here, put that down. Did you brush your teeth? Where are your shoes? Right? This is just how we talk to most kids, right? Sound familiar? And what we learned is that inadvertently, without meaning to, we are creating a spike in heart rate and blood pressure in that child because we're asking a question or giving a command. Even if it's a nice question, which cookie do you want? Chocolate or chocolate chip? It's like win-win. You can't lose, right? Chocolate. But if it creates a moment where I have to make a decision, or what if I choose the wrong one, or what if I like that, which all is resolvable. But when you have that flood or sort of rush of what feels like an anxiety response, because you asked about which cookie, you can't imagine. Why would that cause a problem? It's about cookies. But if we instead shift our communication style to a more declarative communication using what I call I statements, Melissa Reiner speaks, sort of speaking without asking or giving a command, just the speaking, we don't see that same anxiety response. So I might just say, I have two cookies here. One is chocolate chip and one is chocolate chip. I don't know which is your favorite. I don't know which one you prefer. That's an I statement. I don't know. I'm just sort of thinking and talking that thought out loud. I don't know which is your favorite. That leaves that child with no pressure on their shoulders. There is no reason to feel that anxiety response once we've eliminated the questions or the commands, or at least drastically reduced the questions and commands. And so suddenly, a child who struggles to make choices making choices can create a lot of anxiety for kids. Even if I was just working with a family and their son was at Target, and for like a gift, they were giving him a choice of one Lego set. They were about the same price, both Star Wars, they both like, it was a win-win. There was no bad option. And he was paralyzed. He was struck with what felt like, for him, like a life or death choice. It was terrifying for him. And it was just, I don't know, the same price. Both, I love Star Wars. They have both in stock. I can't choose. And he almost decided to go home without purchasing either. Right? And he was so sweet. He was just overwhelmed and overwrought. And instead of, choose one, or why aren't you choosing one, the command or the question, I want to make a pro and con list. I like this set because of this reason or these reasons, and I like this set because of these reasons. And I want to come up with a solution. If you get this set and you find, ugh, I should have gotten the other because it has this other character or this other whatever, I wonder if there's a way that we could put that on our wish list for the holidays
Mm.
or for the next birthday. I wonder if we can just put a, so it doesn't have to be, it's that gray area. It's that ability to collaborate and come up with a contributive idea. And when everyone is partnering, everyone's invested. And so when we're all invested, we all matter, which is the missing piece, I think, in today's, sort of geopolitical framework is not everyone is viewed as having worth or value.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You said a couple things there that that are so true. I mean, anxiety levels in kids is off the roof right now. I still don't know why, but I think it might be a little bit of what the other word you said, which was overstimulation. And I think our kids are just quadzillion times, with the biggest word I can think of, overstimulated. It's like you don't ever really see a lot of kids just sit back and throw rocks in a pond, or just chase a frog or just climb a tree or just sit under a tree in the shade, right? It's like, and parents, I think, my parents were complete whack jobs. And so, of course, my brother and I wanted to be really good parents to make up for our childhood, right? So early on, it was like, let's get them into soccer, let's get them into this, let's get them into that, and blah, 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 blah. And then my wife and I were like, this is stupid. Let's just spend time with our kids, right? We're just doing too much. My brother stayed in that, and his kids are just like, love his kids. Love, love, love his greatest kids in the world. But you know what I mean? I think we overstimulate. And then now with the social media, it's like turned up a whole nother notch, which has created this crazy anxiety in our kids.
And also, I think that, if there's so many layers to this, but if we as parents, as adults, if we don't know necessarily how to connect in with our kids, keeping them busy is good for them and good for us. Because then
Mhm.
I'm shuttling them around. I'm a chauffeur and they're making sure they get here on time and they're on time and they have a snack in the car and they can get dinner on the way. And and there's value to that in so much as I think sports are wonderful. I think they're incredibly valuable for so many reasons. But when we're overloaded and every minute of every day is booked, there's no downtime, which is what you were talking. There's no way to, you said set back, and there was this movement for a minute, but it was about settling. Can I just settle for a minute? And when you say a pond, we were at a like a botanic gardens, and I always marvel at this. I don't know why it's so interesting to me. It's not novel, but when I was looking at the lily, they call it the lily pad pond, I think. I was looking and you see the lily pads on top of the water, and maybe you see a heron, or maybe you see, and then if you keep looking, if you're still enough to stay there and hang out a minute, oh, there are little fish in there. I didn't even see. Oh my gosh, I think those are, and you see wildlife or marine life, or, you see plants and you see a world teeming underneath the surface of that water that you would have for sure missed if you were just looking at the surface. And
Yeah.
sitting still enough to receive and appreciate, it's like a lost art these days.
Mhm. It really is. And we used to take our kids. We have a place up in the mountains in Big Bear and Lake, and we used to take the kids, and we used my wife would take duct tape and put it reversed and put it on their wrists, and we would hike and we'd see who could fill up the duct tape better with flowers or leaves or little stones or, and I'd say, even if you've got a frog, throw that frog on there, see if it'll hold. And so that was our mission, and they were boys, right? So it's like, well, boys can't be picking flowers and make little flower bracelets. Sure, they can. Why not? Boys love flowers too, right? Flowers are great. You got bees and stuff. But it was that searching, it was that looking at the flowers. What kind is that? Where do you think, just to get out in nature, get some sunshine, get some fresh air, get some s- different type of stimulation than this stuff that's just shoved in our faces, right?
downloaded by our eyeballs. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
really nice
I
to
want
be.
to touch on something that's a little bit for so many people. I don't know why this has become a battle. I guess because the whole vaccine thing and the whole vaxxers and anti-vaxxers and all this, but autism. Like I mentioned, we have a grandson who's very autistic. I think he's 9 or 10. I guess I should know that. He's my grandson. Um, but he's never spoken a word. Spins around in circles. He's you know, nonverbal. It's tough. It's really tough. And so you spend a lot of time around autism. Is autism worse now than it was, or do we just pay attention to it more than it was?
Well, I think it's a little bit more complicated than that, but I think that first and foremost, there's what's known as like a pathogenesis. There's not just one cause, right? And so there's so many contributing factors. And ultimately, I think we are all such unique beings that each person I've worked with is unique in and of themselves, and they have different strengths and different assets, and they have different challenges and different hurdles to overcome because we're just all so unique. And
Yeah.
I really, I always say I don't treat a diagnosis, I treat a child, right? So I'm working with, or an
Mm.
individual, I'm working with the individual in whatever way they need, right? And also my goal is not to someone said, will you help fix my child? And I don't fix
Mm.
anything, right? That's not, I want your child to be exactly who they are, right? Because they're extraordinary and beautiful and perfect. And if there are challenges, I want to help everyone to feel equipped to navigate through them. So, so to put a pin in that for a second, but to answer your question, I think 60 years ago, it was very hard to get a diagnosis of autism. You had to be very severe. And then so someone said to me the other day, they said, well, I guess, I mean, autism didn't really exist until recently. And I was like, no, there's so much evidence that you can, historical documents, you can see, from millennia, I mean, but you can see that there are certain people who probably, there was no formal diagnosis, but clearly maybe had attributes. So I think that the diagnosis has broadened and opened up to include more than it used to. So it used to be, I think, a little bit tougher to get a diagnosis because just like with anything, the more we learn and discover and understand, about anything, the more we learn and understand more about it, right? And so I think that a long time ago, it was just the most severe cases. Um, and but I think that now there's it's a broader spectrum, right? It's a broader understanding. And so there are different qualities, and sometimes people will leap too quickly to assume that there's a diagnosis of one thing or another, about many different, kinds of diagnoses. But I think that uh, sometimes kids are there's so much plasticity in the brain that when I work with a child who one day looks this way and in a few weeks looks a different way, it's like, well, did he have a diagnosis or didn't he? And I was like, well, again, I'm not, I mean, I'm not I don't diagnose, right? I'm not a diagnostician, but I don't know. And I kind of don't care. I care in so much as sometimes it helps people to get services, but I care about this human being, and I'm whole child focused or whole individual focused. And so all I know is we've seen growth, and we've seen that this used to be an issue and now it's not. And that's what I know, right? And so just because, and my friend, and this is, I don't know why this is so controversial, but it's so controversial, but my friend's son, um, really appeared to be impacted by autism, and he's becoming a speller, right? So he's using different ways, different modalities to communicate through spelling words out, right? So a lot of kids who are nonverbal or non-speaking, they are now able to, and again, I actually don't understand why this is a controversial, why offering any, I'm a throw spaghetti against the wall and see what sticks. Like if this helps your child, fantastic. Didn't work for this kid, works for your kid, fantastic. Let's do, like, I don't care. Let's just see what works. And so my friend's son, who struggled so much, they're learning everything about him because he's able to communicate through spelling now in a way, and your grandson might look into it. It's the spelling sort of world is amazing and important. And why would, anyway, there's like, I don't know why there's a whole world of people who are like, I don't know. I think they,
Why would that be? Well, first of all, I just you use the word spectrum, and I was going to ask you about the spectrum about, I guess from this level to this level. I would imagine that Ryan is on one of the furthest levels because he's nonverbal and doesn't communicate and things like that. Um, and I guess there's an interim. Are they still gauging children on a spectrum of where they think kids are?
well, I think there used to be they used to sort of create different levels for how they would say, they used to say high functioning or low functioning, and they don't say that anymore. So it's just autism. There used to be Asperger's, now there's not. But again, pardon me, I think I've worked with a child who had a diagnosis of autism. He also suffered from like a lot, he used to have a lot of seizures throughout the day, like many an hour, right? Small ones, but nonetheless. And someone in his family said, he's really low functioning. And I try to be so careful about that because again, we don't really
Mm.
say that anymore. But the idea was that he really can't do. And I found when I was working with him that he was a wonderful apprentice and that he was so eager to connect in a way that other kids who may appear to be functioning in a classroom more readily or whatever and getting good grades, this child was so receptive and so interested in partnering with me. It was, to me, that's one of the most valuable skills a human can have, whether or not you have a diagnosis of anything. Just being able to
Yeah,
connect, right? And this is what we're talking about, connecting in with other people. And he was
exactly.
so interested, but often if he was having a seizure or if his autism, like sometimes it would kind of help him to kind of go into this internal space where he would have this, his own world kind of view. And it looked like he couldn't be reached, but he could. And so here was this
Yeah.
kid that people had sort of labeled as whatever. And really, he and I made strides in important ways, like really in important ways. So I've done this long enough to know, and I've lived long enough to know in general that people surprise you. And when you think one thing about someone because of their height or their weight or their diagnosis or the color of their skin or whether they've gray hair or not, you know, people have all kinds of ideas. And as soon as we can strip that veneer, as soon as we can sort of pull those layers away and remove those layers that get in the way of us connecting as real humans, it's a game changer.
It's funny because I have my grandson has a cousin. These are all from my second wife's family and kids and stuff. And the cousin, and I won't say his name like I did my grandson's. Maybe I shouldn't have, but he I'm gonna say it. I don't care. So Scott just graduated high school, and I met Scott when I met my first wife. I mean, my second wife. My first wife passed, but um, so I meet Scott, and they preface it. Scott's on the spectrum, and so if you aren't comfortable around him, that's okay. And I'm like, dude, I'm on the spectrum. Are you kidding me? I'm comfortable with everybody, right? So Scott and I hit it off like peas and carrots,
Yeah.
and we happen to share this amazing um, fascination with World War II. The difference is I'm very interested in World War II, and I have a bunch of books on it. I've studied World War II. Scott is a computer of World War II. He will tell you every battle, what tanks were there, who the general was, and this kid is supposed to be on the spectrum. He's brilliant. I hope you have 5 hours if you ask,
Yeah.
hey, what did Rommel do in the deserts of Africa, right? Oh no, no. So he's brilliant, right? He's brilliant. And I interviewed a guy named John Brink, and John Brink wrote a book called ADHD is a Superpower. He didn't know that he was dyslexic and had ADHD until he was in his 60s. And it was just his superpower. He just outworked everybody. He had a different way of doing things than everybody. And this whole time he was on the spectrum, right? This guy's a billionaire. It's like crazy. So,
Well, yeah.
right, like you said, it's like the individual, what their gifts are and what their talents are, not what their labels are.
And the other thing is, not, and then sometimes the flip side is people say, well, my child is on the spectrum, he's a genius, and he doesn't have to be. Not everyone on the
Right.
spectrum is a genius, right? And he can just be an amazing human who's a caring, thoughtful person who isn't a genius. Like I'm not a
He
genius.
doesn't have to be Rain Man. He doesn't have to count every
I'm not a
matchstick that
genius,
falls on the floor.
but I still, I still connect with people. So I think that the bottom line is whatever, somebody said, what if you had to introduce yourself, but you couldn't say your name, your occupation, where you were born, or so you had to talk about other parts of yourself, what your favorite color is, what your favorite meal is, what music you like to listen to. You couldn't say your name, your age, your occupation. These are the sort of the list that we check off of how to get to know someone. Where are you from? What do you do? But what if you couldn't say those things, right? And what if you
Yeah,
just
you'd
had
be
a
you'd be introducing yourself and we'd all be meeting ourselves at a different level.
different
It's
level?
not who you are, it's what you are, more of a thing. But so how are you communicating with these kids? You talk about communication and you talk about, working with the kids and the adults and the educators and things like that. I know Ryan carries a little thing, and sometimes you say, "Which one's the bear?" And he pushes the thing, goes, "Bear." Well, good job. Hey, I knew what the heck the bear was, right? So, how are you communicating with some of these kids that are nonverbal and trying to get with through them to them?
So, so there are two different components, right? We have receptive language, right? Which is how we understand, and expressive. So just like with anyone, if for myriad reasons we aren't able to talk, we have a sore throat, or when my children were babies, or someone who is a non-speaking individual, or nonverbal, right? And so, I think that if someone has specifically receptive language or receptive communication intact, um, there's no limit. There's no limit to what you can't communicate to me. And I feel like most everyone, whether or not they can verbalize or express, like the expressive language isn't in place, maybe if they can't express their feelings, they're, like I said, my friend's son is a speller, and there are different ways to communicate, but we can understand and relate non-verbally, uh, beautifully, right? And there are ways to absolutely understand someone's intention, and there can be misunderstandings, but there are misunderstandings aplenty when we're using verbiage. So we always misunderstand each other anyway. And so I think that it's, again, to me, it's really about connecting in on a deeper level. It's not just about, and to your point, or to what you had mentioned, it's not just about point to the bear and say bear. Because while that's nice, right? That's good information. It's good to know. It doesn't tell me anything about your grandson. Just because he can point to a bear and say bear, that's nice. It's interesting on some level. But who is he? What does he enjoy doing? What lights him up? What puts a smile on his face? What brings him joy? What makes him sad? What's frustrating for him? I want to understand, what makes him tick. I want to understand him, not just because he can point to Bear and say, Bear, good job. Like, I mean, I get the value of it, but ultimately, I want to connect with everyone I meet and everyone I work with and everyone in my life on a more meaningful level, you know?
Mm. Well, that brings us back to where we started. How on earth do we get people to start having a conversation without confrontation? How do we pull it? How do we just pull it way back and go, oh, guys, you need to be way up here instead of way down there? How do we
I
do that?
think I think that there ultimately is, and I don't mean to sound this way. The first blush is there is no way, but I don't mean it like that. What I mean is I am not in the business of trying to get everyone else to figure it out. I'm barely figuring it out myself, right? In the world, right? So I'm not here to try to make everyone get it. But what I can do is I can bring light into the world where there's darkness. I can bring joy or insight where there is a void of it, where there's nonsense instead. And it doesn't mean it gets heard. I have long said for myself, if I'm in conflict with someone, I don't need to simply say what's on my mind or in my heart in order to convert them or get them to my way of thinking. I just need to voice my truth because that's what's important to me. It may not change, it may not elicit change in that other person, and most likely it won't, right? If somebody's racist, I'm probably not going to convince them to not be racist, but I can share my perspective and tell them what I think about it because that's what's important to me. Doesn't mean they'll receive it or hear it or care about it. But I've also lived long enough to know that when we sometimes plant a seed, if it's the right time and the right moment, even if it's before the right time and the right moment, when that world aligns for that other person, they might go, oh, that's what she was talking about. That makes sense. So sometimes we hear things and we aren't ready to receive it. And and it isn't our job to make sure someone does. But it is our job to honor our own truth and to share our own insight and to share our own thoughts and feelings and ideas, hopefully without hate and fueling them. You know what I mean? So I think that if people are honest and caring and are interested in the human connection and the human condition genuinely, not some of the stuff we hear, but if people are genuinely interested, right? Because it doesn't mean that there isn't war. It doesn't mean that there isn't savagery and barbaric behavior. It doesn't mean that my desire for peace and love and happiness, for whatever that's worth, which by the way, I'm going to just say this. Sorry. A lot of families will say, I just want my child to be happy. And I think it's nonsense. And I'll tell you why. Happiness is elusive. Happiness is a spark, a moment, the briefest, glimmer of joy or something that was funny, something that was elating. It is not sustainable. So if you just want everyone to be happy, you will be disappointed. And I
That's
think
so true.
what I'd rather have in my ideal world is if everyone walked around with a sense of self based in competence and based in not only their truth, but not and just feeling competent and feeling fulfilled. If I'm fulfilled in my life, if I'm a competent person walking through my life, I don't need to crap on anyone else. I don't need to because I'm okay. It's when we're not okay that we need to crap on everyone else. You know what I
I
mean?
used to always tell my boys, unfortunately, it's not as true today as it was just a little while ago, but I used to tell people, when someone's really mad at you, just keep being nice to them because it's very difficult. Not today. People seem to be able to hold on to that
Yeah,
anger for a
they're
long
good
time,
at it.
right?
They're getting better at
But
it.
back in the day, when you're sitting with someone face to face and they're really ticked and you're going, I know, right? Oh, that totally sucks, huh? Oh, I know. And you are being kind and agreeing with them without being, without being, know that they're just, you, sarcastic, whatever. um, it's very tough for someone to continue to be mad
Yeah.
because it's just not our nature. We come out of the womb as happy people and kind and loving creatures, right? And it used to work marvelously. Now people can really hold on to that hate, man. It's crazy, but I agree. I think people who just want to poop on other people continuously are really sad people, and
Yeah.
at their soul, they've just got to work through some stuff.
And if I can recognize that, then it helps me to understand it in a different way. And it really, there may be something I do, something I have done, something I haven't done, something I said, something I didn't say that rubs people the wrong way or that people don't like. And that's fine. That's on them. So maybe it's something I did or didn't do, but it really has nothing to do with me,
Mm.
right? And when
And
I
you just can't take it that way. You just can't. You gotta. There's someone I was talking to said, some relationships just have expiration points, expiration dates, and there's not a lot you could do about it. And when it's like a carton of milk. When it expires, it expires, and you gotta let it go, right?
Yeah, it's great. I love that. I love that idea. Yeah, it does. Because sometimes you lament, that you don't have that person in your life or they aren't who you thought they were. And you lament that and you can be sad that you don't have what you once had. But you're right. If it's not happening, it's not happening.
It's not happening. What you said about the kids, I just want my kids to be happy. I always wanted my kids to be alive. I wanted them to run and fall down and scrape their knee and get up and say, just rub some dirt on it, spit on it, you'll be fine. It's when they fell and they didn't make a sound that I was scared to
Right,
death,
they're
right?
quiet. Yeah. That moment of
As long
silence.
as they screaming, it's okay. But it's like, go live, go make mistakes. If you're so worried about being happy or being perfect or making your parents proud or something like that, you're just not going to make mistakes. You're not going to live. You're not going to experience things. You're going to be live in fear and anxiety all the time. Just
Making
not a
choices.
great way to live.
No, it's impossible.
Yeah. Well, you've been wonderful. And I lied earlier because I'm a liar. Guys are liars. I said I had one question, but I actually have two questions.
Go for it.
I always give you the what if you could question because sometimes people want to think about that one and I want to let them. But this question I don't want you to think about.
Ooh.
So before we skedaddle, Melissa Reiner, um, if there's a thought that you'd like to leave with us, a quote, something that means something in Melissa's heart that before we go off, that you would just love to share with everybody, what would that last thought be?
I think it's that, pardon me, I think it's that part of what I was saying where, I usually start off every session with a family by saying, I am an imperfect parent. I am not, they used to say if you would open up back when people had magazines, but if you would open up a parenting book or a beauty magazine, you would feel ugly in a parenting book and you would feel like a terrible parent. And if and it's interesting because I don't think that's the aim, right? The aim is not to make for a beauty magazine to make people feel ugly and for a parenting book to make people feel like lousy parents. And I think that if we can give ourselves grace, like you said, to get it wrong, and if that is accompanied by this experience of then figuring out how we can do it differently or better the next time, then I think that's the triumph. I think that that's our win in life. If we can get it wrong, like I said, I have a regret, right? And there's nothing I can do about, handling it differently with my mom, but I certainly can do it differently if I'm faced with, God forbid, a similar situation or anything like that, where I can show up in a different way and I can always learn and I can always grow. And just like I hope the world gives most of the population I work with grace, where I see, I think people, uh, a lot of people I work with are sometimes isolated or misunderstood and not appreciated or valued. And I think I always say my thing is I think we're on this planet to connect in with other humans, to feel heard and to feel valued. So we can be imperfect, we can give ourselves grace, and we can walk through this world with our head held high and know that we'll do better tomorrow if we can.
I love that. I love the word grace, and I always tell people, I tell my friends, and I tell my kids, and I tell my family, it's just be more gentle with yourself, just be a little more gentle with yourself and other people. It's not a battle, we're not here to just fight it all out. And especially with yourself, I like the word grace. Give yourself some grace, give other people grace. Just be a little kinder to yourself, it's tough enough out there, right? We don't need to beat ourselves up all the time.
Lots are doing it for us. We don't need to, get on that bandwagon for sure.
Yeah, and I love what you're doing because it's true, when I see people around my grandson or when see people around, Scott, who I just love, Scott, they're uncomfortable. They don't know how to react or they don't know how to interact or what to say to the parents, and it could be very uncomfortable when it doesn't need to be.
I mean,
It doesn't need to be uncomfortable.
treat everyone like you would treat everyone else. It's like
Yeah,
you want to
yeah.
say hi, and if it doesn't, but people don't know. And I also give people grace who don't know. And I, like somebody who said, well, autism didn't exist before. And I was like, it has probably always, but I give that person grace. I'm not trying to humiliate them or make them feel like it was a silly question. Like I want everyone to feel valued. And so if that helped that person learn something new because I was able to share it in a polite and respectful way, then that's a win.
Yeah. I think there was probably some kings and some emperors and some queens that were on the spectrum back in the day that we could go back and go, yeah, they definitely were on the spectrum, right?
Yeah.
I think so too. So, Melissa Ryder, you were great. So, what do you have coming up? Where can we find you? Where can we get more of Melissa Reiner Speaks?
So it's all of my, handles for TikTok and Instagram and LinkedIn are, Melissa Reiner Speaks. So at Melissa Reiner Speaks and one L, two S's, Melissa Reiner. And I am writing a book that I'm almost finished with called it's building competence one conversation at a time, but it's that conversation over confrontation, right? And so my book hopefully will be coming out, I hope, in the next 2 months. So I'm excited about that. And I'm continuing to speak as a keynote speaker and, working with educators and people who run facilities to help everyone find a way to communicate more effectively so that there is less confrontation and more conversation.
Well, I certainly love that. I can't wait for the book, and conversation instead of confrontation. If there's ever been a time in the history of the world
We
that
need
we need more good, honest, heartfelt, open conversation and less meaningless, stupid
it.
confrontation over things that just don't matter, I, it's just beyond me. Has there ever been a time in the history of the world that it's been crazier than today? I don't think so,
No, it seems like it's ramped up a little bit, but here we are.
just amped up a little bit. But all right, everybody, we've been blessed with some great conversation with no confrontation for Melissa Reiner, and I'm just so grateful that you're here today. I can't wait till everyone gets to see our wonderful little conversation. So
Thanks
thank you so much, Melissa. I really enjoyed having you here with us today.
for having me. Appreciate it. Thanks.
Cool.
Thanks.
All right, guys. Thanks again, and we'll see you next time on another episode of the What If You Could podcast. Thanks, everybody. See ya. Thanks again for joining us on another episode of What If You Could podcast. Please subscribe, like, share, and give us any feedback. We'd love to hear it. And remember, if you can dream it, you can do it. See you next time.